Well, everybody, welcome to the Next Steps to Sustainability. I am Anna Burrell. My business partner over there is Vicki Davis. We are the thumbs of the operation here at Twiggs & Co. And one of our main missions is to allow accessible information to sustainability that makes sense and gives us tangible action steps to be able to get our message out there, because those of us who are in this room and around this work, we are here to make impact. So it makes sense that we would want to make sure that our messaging can impact the people that we're looking for. So before getting into that, we start our events with an introduction to us, of course, because you're supposed to, marketing, blah, 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 and also a land acknowledgement, because we do sit on occupied land and we have been founded. All right, so if I may, Twiggs & Co. is a women-led, Denver-based sustainability consulting and implementation firm. We work to broaden the everyday lens of sustainability and the impact that it can have. By tripling bottom lines, we create and implement corporate social responsibility programs that increase the impact an organization, a business, and/or a movement can have. This, in turn, helps us fulfill our mission by helping to facilitate the shift from the economy that we have to an economy that actually serves the people existing within it. We are here to disrupt the status quo. And sometimes that means that we disrupt ourselves. So if you find yourself triggered, perfect. That is an entry point that helps us find our biases, our blind spots, and what we need to improve. We are not here to run away from bad feelings. We're here to face them and do better next time. Twiggs & Co. was founded in Denver, Colorado on the occupied lands of the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Ute, and the Sioux Nations. So in order to acknowledge this, I'm pulling up a link here. In order to acknowledge this, one of our very first steps is to learn and share how to say the names that we just listed off properly. We're practicing. So to help with that, one of the things, so the Sioux Nation in research is actually, it's two main tribes that have two different preferred names, but the ones that we sit, or the lands that we sit on here in Denver, that is what they would prefer to be called. So with that, and to attempt to not butcher this name, done a little bit of research, and this website has a couple of options on how to pronounce this. Now, this is the internet, so take it with a grain of salt. To help share this information more broadly, I'm doing some research to find a person who is willing to share the proper pronunciation of these names. The second thing that we are working on is we are actively working to bring effective land acknowledgements to life. And so to do this, we're partnering with Sydney Jackson Ploxton of Citrine Unlimited to create a respectful and immersive cultural experience. It's currently scheduled for the first weekend in August of 2022. There's more, I'm sorry, Danielle, I was just sending all of this just to you. So, it's fine, 18 months later. This is information on the land acknowledgement, the trip that we are taking. That's the link that I didn't share widely to the group. So one of the reasons why we're partnering with Sydney is because she does culturally sensitive and culturally immersive programs and is able to speak about to facilitate the speaking about very sensitive topics. So number 3, we're always going to include land acknowledgements at our events. And then number 4 is we're volunteering with organizations who are working on food justice that honors more holistic, regenerative, and traditionally indigenous ways of managing and working with the land in a non-extractive way. So as Twiggs & Co., we promise to hush, pick up shovels, and go to work. So if you would like to find the story of the land that you are on, here is a phone number. I will not just send to Danielle, that you can text with your zip code in the United States and Canada, and it has actually a really cool interactive map with a whole bunch of stuff. And then if you want to learn more about working with us and determine just how much we can do together with corporate social responsibility, radical collaboration, and beyond, contact us anytime. Vicki, do you mind popping our website in the thing? Okay, so that was our land acknowledgement. Thank you very much for your patience. And there's a lot of information out there. If you want to pick anybody, like if you want to pick our brains about how to do a good one for yourself, also let us know that, please. Okay, so illustrious panel. Do you mind, each of the three of you, do you mind introducing a quick introduction to yourselves? We'll start with, let's go in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Allegra.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that, Anna, and thank you for having me here on this panel. My name is Allegra, and I am a storyteller, a connector, a facilitator, and fundraiser. And I am also a nonprofit sector nerd. So strengthening brands and marketing strategy comes second to deconstructing the nonprofit industrial complex for me. I have a consulting practice. I'm the founder and principal consultant at Catharsis, which is all about helping nonprofits tell their stories in a way that's aligned with their values to kind of meet the goals of accessing resources, engaging community, and carrying out their missions. And I'm happy to be here.
Nice. Thank you for being here. All right, Dannielle.
Hi, I'm Dannielle. I'm with the Lion Project, and I work also as a nonprofit marketer and communicator, and also really a large part of what I do in fundraising as well, but is video production. And so I have a lot of insight and hope to get some questions about video storytelling specifically. But thank you.
Nice. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here. Winna.
Hi, thanks for having me today. I'm Winna Mclaren. I am the Communications and Engagement Manager for the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency in the City and County of Denver. It's a relatively new office. We celebrate our first birthday this summer. And my division, Communications and Engagement, is even newer. So I am tasked with the fun job of sharing all of the stories of how Denver is tackling climate action, as well as being very intentional about reaching groups that have been historically marginalized and those that we haven't heard from. So we've been working to put together a team and have lots to share as far as communications, engagement, public relation, and more.
Nice. Thank you all very much for being here. It's such an honor to sit on this panel with you. So I cheated a little bit and I asked the panelists to seed some questions that allow them to speak to their expertise, and holy cow, the questions I got, I cannot wait for this. Okay, so let's start off with Dannielle. You have this beautiful question about philosophy. So storytelling is a hot word at the moment for marketing and messaging. Can you share with us some of the philosophy behind it?
Absolutely. I would love to share my philosophy. So I really subscribe to Simon Sinek and Start With Why. There's at least one person on this webinar today I've assigned to read Start With Why. But I really believe that by engaging the limbic system, by activating that part of the brain that's responsible for emotions and decision making, that we can get to our goals more quickly in the nonprofit sector. It can be, I call it avoiding the annual report syndrome. So really finding creative, ethical ways to capture stories in a way that activates the donor base, the audience. And I have kind of a framework around that, but make sure that it's the right message, the right storyteller, and that you know exactly who your audience is. And that's how I like to start with my philosophy.
Beautiful philosophy. Thank you. So Winna, in your experience, what sets the foundation for impactful and influential and inspiring messaging?
Well, thanks, Dannielle, for leading into a big part of that is knowing your audience. I think a lot of times, and a lot of it is due to just not enough resources, is we put one message out there and feel like, okay, we've done our job. The reality is you are speaking to so many different opinions, thoughts, belief systems, that if you're not differentiating that message and you don't really know your audience that you're speaking to, you're just kind of casting a wide net and hoping to sort of get the results. So I would say the big part is knowing your audience. And from that, you can really build on the philosophy of ethos, pathos, logos. So you might be familiar with those terms, but to apply it to communications and messaging specifically, you want to make sure that you're appealing to, first of all, setting the stage of your credibility. Why should people know or trust what you have to say? What credentials do you have? The other part of that is the pathos. So of course, you need to appeal to something that has the emotional element, right? So we can't just put out a message there without understanding what values might this align with? How can I hit someone's head, heart, pocketbook, values, morals? And then the third one is logos. It has to be a reasonable argument, right? And so you have to make sure that you've got some logic to back that up. And so I always like to make sure that any messaging has those three key elements to make sure that you've got a good, solid message to start from.
Nice, thank you. You brought some very cool things there. This is perfect. You guys are leading into each other's questions beautifully. Okay, so Allegra, over to you. Winna just mentioned talking to your audience, and so I would love to hear from you. What are some of the strategies that you use to get to know your audience and understand what motivates them towards action?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, both Dannielle and Winna were talking about how important it is to know your audience, and I absolutely agree. That's the first kind of foundation of any communication strategy. And so to get to know your audience, my number one kind of piece of advice there is spend time with them. And by that, I mean, like, pick up the phone. I found like that actually having conversations and collecting qualitative information about your audience through conversation, through personal connection, can be a lot more powerful in getting to know your audience than like something like sending out a big survey and trying to understand demographic information or something like that. So what I do is come up with questions that help you understand the lived experiences of your audiences. So like, what are their views on sustainability and climate change? What do they see as their role? And how have they responded to other messages, are some of the things I would try to find out in like a conversation with someone who's part of a community I'm trying to reach. And then from there, kind of go through and pull out the things that quotes from what they said. And then I use that as the beginning of my creative process of developing messaging. So it's like very tangible. Like, I had these conversations and they're feeding into my creative process. And so then the other thing I'll say about getting to know your audience is, once you have messaging out in the world, is test it. So A/B testing is great. And I'm not just talking about email subject lines. Like, you know, pick a strategy for your messaging and try it out for a few months, and then switch strategies and record results and analyze it. And you'll learn a lot about your audience in that way too. And just part of that is figuring out, how am I going to measure what works? How am I going to measure my communications? And really being rigorous about that measurement, and using what you learn to inform your messaging going forward.
Nice, very cool, thank you. So you mentioned speaking directly to your audience. This hops over, so back to you, Winna, and then Dannielle, you're on deck. Winna, how do you diversify your messaging to be able to speak to different audiences?
Yeah, so the engagement part is a huge piece. And so, you know, when I look at engagement work, and what really works is, number one, building that trust with that audience, and really getting to understand where they're coming from, their perspectives, what challenges you can solve for them, and what opportunities you can share. And so a big part of that is, especially if you're in the position to have some engagement strategies, is get out there and talk to them. Find out what makes them tick, find out what's important in their community, find out what's important to their groups. From there, I think you can get a really good sense of, you know, their value system. What is it that you can speak to? How can your message really align with what's important to them? And so anytime you're trying to put that messaging out there, you have to be able to communicate value, or something that is of interest to them. And so that's why it's really, really important to talk differently to different groups of people, so that you are being effective. Your message is the same, but the way that you're going to deliver it is going to change depending upon who you're speaking with.
Thank you. Jotting notes, don't mind me. All right, so you spoke about engagement and speaking to different groups of folks. So Dannielle, in your experience, what kinds of stories have been getting the most engagement and the most interaction?
So what I like to talk to clients about when I'm producing something, it's really getting to the most personal. What I call it is, which is not revolutionary, but getting the closest as you can to impact. So I've done that in a lot of different ways to stick to my ethical, safe, all of those things, storytelling. But the more personal a story can be, the higher your engagement. The longer someone will watch a video, the more time someone will pause on your post. The more, a partial story in an email newsletter is going to get a click through. The more that you can bring it down to one person or one family, it really will increase your engagement by significantly.
That's about those metrics, it sounds like.
Well, it sounds like she's a lot better at metrics than I am. That is an exercise for me, not a talent.
Gotcha. Just a heads up, off-script question that might come up are what metrics in particular do you three find helpful? And if the group as a whole has any answers to that as well, can open it up for group discussion a little bit early as well. So one of the common themes is appealing to those individual people. So Allegra, what do you know about the role of appealing to emotions and values, especially in communication related to climate action and sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So the caveat with this question is there isn't a lot of conclusive research about this yet. There is some exciting stuff around that people are looking at this question because it's becoming one of like the most important questions of our time, right? But what we do know, and Winna was talking about this really nicely as well when she was talking about her ethos, pathos, and logos, and I'm taking notes on my co-panelists too. So, what we do know is that reason alone isn't what drives human behavior, and so emotions and values are really important components of messaging. So, what the approach I think is best is to understand that your messaging isn't happening in a vacuum. We are living in an age where we're getting messaging from all sides all the time, and more so now around climate and sustainability than ever before. And so your messaging that you're putting out there is in the context of a lot of other different messaging. And that's a good thing because there isn't going to be a big emotional reaction once that changes a behavior. Like that's not how human behavior change works. It's something that's a mix of emotions and cognitions over time. And that's where you get in kind of those like three components, like the ethos, logos, pathos. And the other piece of that is that emotional responses fade without reinforcement. So one of your jobs as kind of a communicator who has a message that you're kind of crafting to get out there, hopefully to call your audience to a certain action, is making sure there are many different touch points that's entering your audience life at various spaces. A lot of organizations I work with get worried about bombarding their communities of donors or supporters with a lot of information that's repeat information. And there's actually research that shows that you need at least 7 touch points to have a message stick. And so if you're worried about that, know that when every single audience member isn't going to be seeing every single thing you put out there, and 2, that it's actually a good thing to have kind of the same messaging, and there can be variation there, and it might be look different across different platforms, but really have those same people seeing the same messaging to help guide them through the journey of getting ready to take action. And then kind of thinking about the relationship between values and emotion for me, it's that values provide context for the emotional response that you'll get from your audience. So it's just so critical to understand what your audience's values are, because understanding that can help you anticipate various emotional reactions from the content you put out. I think that's all I have to say on that topic right now.
You touched on getting to know your audiences again, and it's really important for the three of you. And I'm sorry for not giving you a heads up that this was an off-script question, but for the three of you, I know, Allegra, you mentioned getting on the phone, but Dannielle and Winna, what do you have any get to know you engagement tactics with audiences that you're interested in or curious about for all the panelists?
Almost no one says no to a free cup of coffee. And it can, even if it's a big donor, or somebody who you might not expect, it's pretty incredible how often people will say yes to a free cup of coffee to have conversation. And my goal is always to talk as little as possible and just listen, because it's always at the 70% mark of a conversation. Always, you can set a watch by it where you get to the stuff. So you need to schedule enough time with someone one-on-one to get to that golden nugget, to get to that 70% mark where magic happens. So I would say I do a lot of work just one-on-one, and even in COVID, just, do you want to have a coffee over Zoom? And then I would send a Starbucks card if I'm trying to butter somebody up to sit down and talk to me.
Nice. Winna?
Yeah, sorry, there was a fun ding dong noise. I think there are a number of ways you can go about doing it. Yes, free coffee always does the trick. If you're trying to really capture a wider audience, I mean, it seems simple, but people are putting their values out there all the time. So believe it or not, I am known to scroll through the comments. Reddit is a great resource. There are some tools out there, depending upon budget too, that you can use as far as kind of monitoring the sentiment of what's going on. If we're talking about poor air quality, how are people responding to that? And what are the words and the language that they're using? It does take a little bit of extra time, but I mean, if you go combing through different sites and you are reading comments, not with, obviously it can be very toxic, but with sort of like an educational research sort of understanding of okay, let me try and figure out where these people are coming from. Let me try and see what are their values? What are their beliefs? What's driving them? I find that very helpful a lot of times. Another strategy is on the engagement side. And so a lot of groups are wondering, how do I get involved? How do I get involved with your organization, your mission, the work that you're doing? Those partnerships are really great at sort of establishing what is our relationship, because you have a conversation about what it is that you need help and support with, and where their needs and desires lie. And so that can be very revealing as far as how can we make this work, and how can we make these partnerships flourish on both ends, making sure that we're being respectful of each other's needs.
Very cool.
I already spoke about this. So the only thing I'll add to is that oftentimes with this type of discussion, people want to share. And I think there's sometimes fear around asking your audience to share their thoughts with you. But I've found that more often than not, it's people are excited about sharing, and you end up just making great connections and having really cool conversations and often positive things beyond you crafting good messages come out of that type of interaction and partnership.
What do you think is a powerful question?
Is that for me, Winna?
Yes, I'm just echoing. I think people value being asked, what do you think? I don't think it's asked enough.
True. And Please, by all means, the panelists are welcome to ask each other questions, and don't worry, audience, you will have your turn too. So that's a great question, Winna. What do y'all think are powerful questions? What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think is a great way to start? Another question that I always like is, how can we meet your needs? It gets, because a lot of time I feel like people are often saying that, they're not hearing, or they're not understanding, or they're not getting what they want. And so like asking the question, well, what is it that, we can do for you? How do we meet those needs? I think can also be very revealing. Another question that I often like to pose is, what are your priorities, right? And so trying to figure out like what's top of the list for folks, what's top of mind, helps kind of frame how to best come at any sort of strategy or any sort of creative message building. For me, I find those two to be pretty helpful.
Okay. Dannielle and Allegra next.
I have such a personal approach. When I have the ability, I try to do this one-on-one. In the current organization where I serve, if somebody has a thought, they pick up the phone or they text me. It's not necessarily that they're going to leave it engaged, which is nice, but it's also pretty intense. A lot of times I just like to get to know the person. I feel like if you can mix in, obviously the things that we have to talk about every day are serious and deserve the space that's required to talk about them appropriately, but it's okay to be fun. And it's okay to get people paying it, in my mind, it's successful. Let's say a posted piece of content is successful when people are talking to one another, and people love sharing about themselves. So mixing in, posing personal questions. What was the first time you ever went to the ocean? Could lead you into a more serious discussion, but I really like the personal stuff.
That's fair.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think Winna is kind of open-ended. So I would say, I don't know if I have a specific question to say, but I would say like the attributes of a really good question is open-ended. Same with Dannielle, kind of like it opens the door to sharing about kind of your personal experiences with whatever topic it is. So like, what do you think about sustainability? What do you think about like commercials about climate and sustainability? Like, how do you react to those? And then just kind of let them talk and take the conversation where they want it. And a strategy that I like to use is just kind of, if you come to a pause in the conversation and you feel like there's more that they have to say that they just haven't said yet, just kind of repeating the last sentence or a couple of words back that they just said, I find can get your audience members kind of talking and continuing to guide the conversation and getting at what's important for them.
That is a really great tactic. Cool, very cool. So we're kind of getting into, we are getting into talking a bit more tangibly. So Winna, do you mind sharing your secret sauce for messaging that is more specific to climate action and sustainability?
For sure. My number one secret sauce is I don't use the words climate action or sustainability. I think that they are just, at this point, buzzwords. They're overused. People have very strong emotions with them. And so in any case possible, I really try and avoid using that language that is so triggering for a lot of people. The other part that I do is, raise your hand if you have ever read and understood an IPCC report. All right, well, Clarissa, she gets kudos today. But let's take the science out of it. That's not going to speak to people. And so anytime that I find that it's getting bogged down in the science of it, It's getting bogged down in terms that people don't understand. I always say if you're writing to sound smart, like you've lost your audience, you need to write to be understood. And so I'm really big on using very plain, relatable language that people can understand and relate to. The third thing I do is there are 20% of your audience are your cheerleaders, right? 20% of the audience are your opposers. You really don't need to spend a whole lot of time on either side of those. That's not to say you ignore your cheerleaders, but they're already on your side. So speaking to that sweet spot in the middle, for me, is where I find the most success.
Nice, very cool. That sweet spot in the middle. So I'd like to, Dannielle, earlier you mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, thank you for that. I love that. Dannielle, earlier you mentioned video storytelling, and we haven't had too much of a chance to talk about that very much. So can we start off with what has been your experience with video storytelling, and why is it your favorite?
Can you say the first part of that again?
Mhm.
Sorry.
Oh no, you spoke about your passion for video storytelling, and so of all of your experiences, what has made videos stick out the most, and why is it your favorite?
Okay, I can speak to both those things. Practically speaking, over the next few years, it's something like 90% of web traffic will be in consuming video content. That is simply how people are consuming information. So it's just another tool in your tool belt to be able to reach the people you want to reach, especially with increasingly shorter attention spans. Some folks might have a more scientific audience or a more educated audience, and you get a little bit extra time with them in general. But typically I try to get to the message within 7 seconds of a video.
Mm.
The reason I really like video storytelling, and I don't want to sound ableist, but I'm going to just talk about it. It's a bit different to have a still shot of a kiddo with her family. Let's say we're promoting foster care. We're talking about, let's say We Cycle. I do a lot of work with them. They have a big sustainability component to their mission. So it's different than getting to hear that little girl's voice and see her play with her brothers and sisters, or see mom trying to get on and off a bus with, let's say, a broken stroller. There is just a deeper, it is a quicker route to that limbic system to getting to those emotions and decision making. And I love that it's someone telling their own story in general, as opposed to me prescribing something.
Very cool, thank you. Winna and Allegra, do you have favorite platforms or messaging vehicles, I should say? I will start with Winna.
Sure, I don't know that I have a favorite. Twitter seems to be where a lot of the action is at, and so we do spend a decent amount of time there. But going back to our different audiences, like we really keep a variety of tools in our toolbox, and so we do send those emails. We are on Facebook, we are on LinkedIn. We're not doing any of the fancy new sort of social media channels. We haven't cracked TikTok with this one. But I think I think part of me is I don't necessarily want to have a favorite, because I don't want to lock out any sort of audience. And so we really do try and diversify where we're sharing our message, so that we are, hitting all of the possible audiences that we can. That being said, Dannielle, you're really onto something as far as like favorite medium. I think videos are where it's at. And so the more that you can put videos together, and they don't have to be super polished, right? You don't have to spend tons of money on a production. People are actually really attracted to the authentic sort of raw storytelling and human stories. And so I think those can work just as well. So I would say definitely explore some video. It's definitely not my forte, and so something that I'm definitely trying to up my game on.
Well, if you're interested, I know someone who does really great video work. Sorry, I couldn't resist. How about you, Allegra?
I was going to start very similarly to Winna, just that I like to be kind of platform and tactic agnostic because it starts with audience always, and then thinking through what will be best for that audience. But I mean, both my co-panelists, I agree with that video is kind of the way things are going. And just like, I know that video can seem really scary for folks like me. And it seems like for Winna, who like, that isn't our forte. And I've done a lot of really interesting learning around the tools out there to put together videos, and like understanding that it doesn't have to be super polished anymore, that those really beautifully put together, professionally done, polished videos do, or I don't know if polished is the right word, but like professional storytellers who are putting together video in a very artistic way that has its place and it's particularly powerful. But then like, you know, there's so much you can do now for like an Instagram reel that wasn't available to us last year. And so I'd say like one of the main things that I do to stay up to date as a communications professional is to continue to learn what's out there to make producing those kind of shorter, quicker videos possible, because it seems really scary until you figure out what the tools are that you can use for it. And then once you know the tools, it seems a lot more doable.
Nice. Thank you. This perfect setup to the next question. Love how this works. Okay, so Dannielle, one of the like, thank God video is accessible and that we have all these apps, and like the back end of TikTok is probably one of the most complex video editing things I've ever seen. But when you look at the cost and the time of getting a professional production company, can you tell us a bit more about that investment and how that you know, is the investment in storytelling, video storytelling, is it worth it?
So I'll tell you a story about the Reciprocity Collective, and I may have to have somebody jump in with the outside numbers. So we started with an executive director who maybe everybody knows, but she is a visionary and also very practical at the same time. And we were trying really hard to get a story nailed down. During COVID, they offered a cell phone giveaway program for those experiencing homelessness because they were suddenly cut off from everything in the world, especially without access to news, health updates. Doctor's appointments were telemedicine. This is one of those times where we got really strategic in thinking about who should be the storyteller and in what the goals were. And we whittled it down, you know, when I said, who should we be talking to? Well, everybody. Well, that doesn't work. This is, I would say, the number one mistake that people make when they invest in video. They want to get as much mileage out of it as possible, which is fair, but you will do yourself an injustice and not get the results that you're hoping for out of it. I was able to connect the Reciprocity Collective. I had someone reach out to me from the marketing side of things. They were looking for an organization. When we were able to show them this video, just that fast, they picked them for this like collective donation drive that they were doing. They were receiving in part some donations, or they got a special deal from T-Mobile. And so when we were looking at the audience, we actually took it down to the bones and figured out we wanted the T-Mobile middle manager who was saying okay to products going out the door. And they actually got an email back that said, you know, today we felt like we actually got to do something human. It was powerful. So it is absolutely worth the investment of time. I teach a whole class on how it's accessible to everybody. And so I completely agree. It doesn't have to be fancy and polished, but when you, so for example, I do a lot of work around galas, or I do work around capital campaigns. There are times where you need a sophisticated, that's maybe not the right word, but you want to put your best foot forward, especially in some of these areas, your gala, talking to big funders. You may need a tool that all your board members, that all your volunteers, that all your communicators can go out and use. And they know they can just push play and it's polished and it's beautiful and it's something that they're proud to show. Because even for the scrappy nonprofit, Reciprocity Collective is certainly one of them, they still have to talk to people who are used to a more professional video. So I've seen these things in action. I've seen them move major donors, and I've seen them uplift a story or a nonprofit who needed that. It is definitely worth the investment, in my opinion. But you know, I always tell people I'll take a Zoom anytime to just ideate, and that's because a lot of times people really want this thing and then they're aiming in the other direction. So really being strategic and thoughtful and ethical, and it definitely has its place, but I'm probably biased a little bit.
Well, if anyone's curious, the link that I put in the chat, if you scroll down that page a little bit, you can see one of the Lion Project's videos, Final Productions. So last question before we open it up to crowd Q&A. Allegra, you mentioned that our messaging doesn't happen in a vacuum. So I have a question directed specifically at you, but if anyone else has any, or if any of the other panelists have any thoughts on this as well, that'd be lovely to hear. How can we look at the not a vacuum that our messaging exists in without being overwhelmed?
Good question. I do have some thoughts on this. So kind of as the communicator, part of your role, going back to what Winna said about monitoring, is understanding the broader landscape that provides context for your messaging. And understanding that there's going to be a lot of other messaging about climate, and there are going to be people who take really different approaches to their messaging. And that's an opportunity to learn. And so one kind of thing that I do is I keep tabs on who are other folks who are working towards similar goals, maybe with different communities, or we're in the same space working towards similar goals. How are they communicating? And not to copy them, but to really watch how they're communicating and how their audience is engaging and taking that information. The other kind of like piece I have to share here is that, especially with climate action, which I think it's very good advice not to use that word in your messaging, but I'll use it here, knowing that it's safe, a safe space. But with climate action particularly, it ebbs and flows, and there are moments when people are ready to take action. And usually, if you're a smaller organization, you're not in control of when those moments are, but you can absolutely be aware and anticipate them. So a recent example is when the IPCC report was released, a lot of folks were kind of like, what can I do? I'm ready to do something. And so understanding when those moments are going to happen and having a really clear goal of what you want to leverage that moment for. So that's a moment where people are looking to take action. Think about what action you want folks to take, and then sweep in and say, like, on a community level, here are some really tangible things you can do. And I think that can be a really effective strategy for smaller organizations with concrete goals, because one thing I think we're all craving right now is, well, we're feeling powerless when it comes to climate change. And so one thing we're craving is actionable steps that we can be in control of that are contributing, and knowing that we're working with the community to contribute. So that's my 2 cents on kind of really keeping tabs on what the broader environment is and contextualizing your messaging within it.
I would just add to that. That was amazing. I would add to that, you know, often what I start with is the call to action. So, you know, folks will come in with great ideas, but nothing happens until we have that solidified and that it's incredibly clear. We know it works. Like if it's a landing page, we know the landing page is up and working. But we start with that call to action and work backwards. And I think that's pretty universally applicable to other forms of communications.
I love that idea. Winna, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
Nothing that I can say that these ladies haven't. I will just add also, as Allegra so beautifully said, you know, understanding the landscape and those moments, right? Be ready to speak up when the next big, hopefully not the next big, but when the next big report comes out, and offer your perspective or how, you know, you're influencing or how you're making a difference there. One of the things that I did was prepare some messages so that I could contact the media because I knew they'd be all over this. And so like, hey, actually, we're on this, like we're doing stuff. And so being ready to be very quickly be responsive to the conversation that's happening, I think is really important. If that's not through earned media, you know, it's reaching out through your social channels or reaching out through your emails, so that you can continue that conversation when it's a big topic.
Thank you. I like that, being prepared, seeing what's coming. And all right, community questions. Vicki Davis, you have some great questions in the chat. Would you like to ask those? Or is there anyone who has a burning question ready to knock the mute button off the computer? No.
Yeah, I'll start. So do you think that there is a correlation between the idea that at the soul of humanity, we just want to belong, right? We want to belong to each other. We want to belong to a community, and the language in keeping sustainability sexy, right? Is there some sort of connection between belonging and like getting people excited about sustainability, climate action, things that we shouldn't, like language that we shouldn't be using?
I think I understand. So you're saying, so the sense of wanting to belong, how might that align with how do we make sure we're keeping sustainability interesting and engaging, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure. And I think, I think just going back to, you see a lot of folks that are already, they're the change champions, right? They're on board. And I think that is that sense of belonging, right? But in that, like, who are you leaving out, especially when it comes to your messaging? And I think it's important to find ways that those people do belong, which for me is always an exercise in, you know, putting aside like what I think and what I feel, and entering into dialogue to say, okay, there's someone else on the other side of me that probably has vastly different ideas, opinions, morals, values. How do we find something that's in common, that goes beyond, right, sustainability, and whatever that might trigger for them? And so it's really trying to have a compassionate conversation about what is important to you, and what makes you feel like you belong to this world.
From a tactical perspective, this is one area where engaging social media ambassadors is really a great way to put it to work for you. And that is just identifying people who have, like, a lot of times I'll go to certain board members or certain volunteers because they have social capital, or they have some sort of, I think earlier, I think it was Winna talking about the credibility thing. But I do think there is a huge advantage to saying to a volunteer ahead of time, will you be a social ambassador for this event? Because it's seeing that person they know, and respect, posting about the experience. People want to be in the club. They want to join the team. They want to take the action. And that's just my 2 cents on a tactical application. That's something that I've seen be really effective.
Yeah, and just to state it really explicitly, I think why that's so effective is it's peer-to-peer. And so when we're talking about belonging, and I was going to say this as an answer to another question and it escaped me earlier, but like there, a peer delivering a message to a peer is always going to be more powerful than like if you're representing an entity or organization delivering that same message. And so figuring out ways to engage folks in delivering messaging to peers can be really strategic as well.
Thank you for those questions. Like I just feel like applause. Oh, okay. So you're going to see a little bit of a behind the scenes moment here. So please pardon me just a moment. Hey, Joan. So we're getting some really good crowd questions, but that means that I would push your talk about 10 minutes. Is that okay if we do that?
Yeah, I have 10 minutes? Is that what I
Yeah.
have a 10-minute block? Yeah, that fits just perfectly. Any later and I have to dash out, but yeah, that's perfect.
Dope.
I can't wait to show you guys what we're doing too. It's like such a cool thing to exactly what we're talking about. Can I share my screen when we get to that point?
Yes, we will make sure that can happen.
Because there's some fun stuff going on that I think would be cool.
Dope. Thank you. All right. Thank you all very much. Curtains back closed. We're back to not being behind the scenes anymore. All right. So Vicky, you had a great follow-up question to that as well. Do you want to? And then Caressa, you're on deck.
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered it. It's sort of that idea of there's a lot of toxicity to the word climate change and sustainability, and how do we reframe it to make it exciting? And I think that you have answered it throughout the series of this, but if you want to add anything specifically to that question of like reframing a toxic situation into a more engaging, exciting situation.
Yeah, other than not using the word if you can avoid it. I really always say that it's a big, scary, like multifaceted issue for people. Just breaking it down. I don't think that you can just talk about the global climate change or talk about how sustainability can solve that without people getting lost and feeling like this is too big, it's hopeless, like what's even the point, right? And so I think making sure that you keep the urgency but hopefulness in your message too, so that it's not the word sustainability and the word climate action aren't tied into this doom and gloom that I think we're all just kind of tired of hearing about. I always tell people when people are ready to move and make action, like we've got 8 different plans that we will run with, and we are keeping up with the latest science. We are ready to pull the trigger whenever we have the funding or the resources or what have you. So I think just making sure that your message is hopeful rather than the world is ending.
Dannielle or Allegra would.
These kinds of, I'm laughing to myself because this is why my friends tell me I'm not fun at parties, because I get worked up, right? I'm talking about something that I'm super passionate about. And I can be that person. From a tactical standpoint, even though we're talking about communications, and I'm sure you've heard me refer to this, giving people a small opportunity, and this is something Twiggs & Co does all the time, right? Giving them an opportunity to do something hands-on is what feeds your donor pipeline. It feeds your audience. It gives you, we can put more people in that cheerleader category, or we can move people through that from one end to the other. Giving them small bits of success. So focusing on success stories, despite all that we're hearing, look at this amazing thing that we were able to accomplish. So I guess I really like the practical stuff, the hands-on stuff. And so that's my thoughts.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is just like, we are in a situation that's more dire than ever before. And there's also so much innovation in this space right now that is exciting, but is hard. But if it's kept in science terms, it's really hard to understand. And so as much as we can understand those stories of like what the kind of like innovative solutions are being developed that we couldn't have imagined 2 years ago, but can we break that down in a way so that anyone could understand it? It's always exciting to me when I'm speaking with someone who has much more expertise in like the climate science world than I do, and they break down something new that I didn't even know was happening that could have, you know, like a huge potential for carbon capture or something like that. I think as much as we can translate the progress we're making into digestible terms, the better.
Beautifully said. I love all of the tangible action steps that the three of you have been weaving throughout this entire, like, oh man, talk about like takeaways where we get to make more impact. Ha! The plan is working. Clarissa, did you want to ask your question? Or was that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you guys covered a lot of it, but I'll just kind of bring up where I'm coming from and see if that brings up any other thoughts. So like, I don't even know how to ask this question without it coming across as like big and heavy, but so I used to do work in international development and water resources, environmental engineer. And so I've seen the potential future of what happens when, you know, if things don't go well on the sustainability front. So, you know, I've just seen places like entire countries collapse, just a lot of really hard stuff. And I feel like ever since I've gotten, you know, shifted back to the domestic market, I've wanted to figure out a way to be like to use that story to be of benefit, but it seems so heavy that I mean, like people aren't even having like the conversations going on around COVID aren't even all that productive right now, in my opinion. So like, how do you actually talk about those harder issues? I mean, like you go to sustainability conferences and they talk about extinction events. And like, obviously you don't use those words, but but how do you actually bring those bigger issues up in a way that, you know, doesn't like traumatize children or just leave it so heavy that you can't have those conversations?
No, that's a great question. It is big and this is all really heavy. One thing I'd say is going back to Dannielle's, what's your why? So when you're talking about people like, why are you doing this scary work? You know, it seems at some points, you know, almost like it's hopeless. And I think a lot of people get that sense. But the other part is talk about it, but also talk about what we're doing to fix it, right? So if we're just talking about the problems and we're not offering like a pathway to the solution, it's going to be really difficult for people to tune in, right? And so I would say always frame the problem with some or several solutions that maybe we might have so that people can say, oh, okay, someone's working on it. And maybe even how can I get involved?
All right, that's actually a gorgeous wrap-up question. I'm going to hand it over to Vicki Carey Davis, who will then hand it over to Joan, because we have some exciting things that you can do to take action.
So all of you guys just basically led up to this just like so beautifully. So, you know, we're talking about belonging and connecting and having tangible actions. And one of the best ways to get people excited about keeping sustainability sexy, about like this movement, is to have these really easy, tangible items. So we can make exponential impact through radical collaboration. It may feel like individually that we're kind of mopping up the ocean with a handkerchief, but when we combine all of our superpowers, then it doesn't feel as scary and it feels like we're doing this together. So we have joined up with the International Climate Action Challenge with the Green Team Academy, and we're doing a radical collaboration river cleanup. So we are trying to create that passion to action. So we're trying to clean up 2 tons of trash out of the South Platte River using businesses, government, nonprofit. It started out at 750 pounds of trash, and then one weekend we cleaned up 1,300 pounds of trash. So we moved it to 2 tons. So if you'd like to join us, we're having a river cleanup on September the 26th. Anyone is welcome to come. It's going to be COVID safe because it's going to be outside right by REI in Denver. So through action, I think there's also room for policy legislation. So it's not just cleaning up the river. It's not just community, but it's community coming together. It's action coming together. And then there's policy. So I asked Good Business Colorado, which they are a business association of value-based businesses advocating on behalf of better policy. And just letting you know, like, session is not in right now, but they're currently working with Representative Lisa Cutter about fixing the plastic and styrofoam ban. That there's been an exemption at the last minute. If you have less than 3 chains in the city of Denver, you're exempt from styrofoam and plastic, the styrofoam plastic ban. So they're working with that. And so if you're really interested in that policy work, we can get you connected to Good Business Colorado. And then finally, so we need value-based, concerned, and active citizens to run for office, because that's really the only way that we're going to be able to wrangle our own government. So finally, we can do this through collective impact. And it takes organizations like Green Team Academy. Joan's here today just to give us an exciting overview of how to take passion to action. So Green Team Academy is this grassroots Denver-based nonprofit that empowers everyday people across the globe to make a really impactful change in the world. So I'm going to pass it to Joan, and she's going to talk a little bit about Green Team Academy and then give some stories of how she has seen people use language and marketing to create amazing impact around the globe. Joan, off to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so happy to be here. And I think this thing that we're talking about right now is the crux of it, is how do we help people that care to actually be part of the solution? How do we get them over feeling powerless and actually making a difference? So I've wasted decades doing stupid shit that didn't have much impact. I, along the way, did some other stuff like wellness coaching and teaching and things out of the engineering realm, out of the sustainability realm, and learned some, and then interviewed people from around the world who are actually making a difference, not who were experts on climate change or whatever, but who are actually making a difference. And I distilled all that into this book called Climate Action Challenge. And so what this book is basically, it's the book that I wish somebody would have given to me. Hey, Joan, you want to make a difference? You're 17 years old, start a team, get 100 partners, come up with an annual plan, do a day of action, do a strategic planning forum. Like, these are things nobody said. Even though I dedicated my life to working for the environment, nobody said this stuff to me. And so that is what we do with Climate Action Challenge. We right now are doing our second Climate Action Challenge, and we have 74 teams from 29 countries. And so, echoing a lot of the stuff that you guys were talking about earlier about the messaging, one of the things that we say, so the subtitle of the book is A Proven Plan for Launching Your Eco Initiative in 90 Days. And we say, if you want to do any kind of environmental or community initiative, we'll help you get it off the ground in 90 days. So, unlike other organizations that say, hey, sign our petition, send us money, work on our project, we say, no, what do you care about? So that's how we address the messaging, is we say, what's important to you? So in Zimbabwe, they've got Eco-Life Africa. In Uganda, it's Rakai Youth. In Nigeria, they're the Green Janitors. These guys, Beta Cole. You know, it's like, what do you care about? Okay, we're in the Philippines, we care about this bokashi, food forest, whatever you want to do. You're the expert on your community. If you have something that's driving you crazy, we've got a couple teachers that there's a community garden that's been abandoned. It drives them crazy. So they're in the challenge to rehabilitate a community garden in 90 days. So our thing is that if you see something, then you're the expert. If it's driving you crazy, you're like, why isn't anybody doing this? Then you're the one that can do it. So I take a lot of what I learned as a wellness coach, and we do use the term climate action. We do not use the term climate change. Climate change is impossible, it's helpless, so we don't talk about climate change, but we do talk about climate action. And the way that we make it fun is we say you can go from passion to action in 90 days. And it's like, what? I just spent, 4 years going through college and, all this stuff. It's like, how can you do anything that quick? But we know we need it to be that quick. And we know that we need transformation. So what we're doing is we're encouraging people to transform themselves, their communities, and the world. And that's a big problem with a lot of the environmental messaging, is it's no, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And it's this constricting feeling. And like, who wants to hang out with somebody that's like, oh, don't do that, don't do that. So we flip it around and we say, yes, you see something, we're going to help you create whatever this crazy idea is. The crazier, the better. Like we've got one of our teams that came in last year. They were doing training people in the slums of Uganda, in Kampala, to do vertical gardening. Another team, a better funded team, came in, an organization, took all their volunteers, like totally crushed their project. They were so hopeless, but they started growing their own tree seedlings. Now, this year, their challenge goal, their 90-day goal, is plant 250,000 trees. It's like, this is how you make it sexy. It's like crazy, big, wild, whatever you want to do. And then the other thing that we realized last year was that we were trying to control. We'd had them send some of their pictures. So we do this really cool thing where we have weekly assignments. They send their photos in, they tell us what they're doing. We have them work through the book. And then we were posting on social media. Well, we did a crap ass job of that. So we turned it around this year and we give them points if they post on social media, and anytime they do, we just repost. So this is what they're doing in our team, Ayoweka, Uganda, who their goal is to plant 15,000 trees. They teach women and girls how to make reusable sanitary pads. Each of these teams, we made a certificate for them. So then they post about it, and then we just repost. There's Vicky's with their team, but you can see here's the Denver, the permaculture team, the Highline permaculture team. So it's just like this amazing thing that when you give up control, and that's a big part of, I think, how you make things better and go faster, is you give up control. Don't tell people what to do, because we're not the expert. We don't know what they need. But if we ask them, what do you need? And then we say, tell your story, and we just amplify it. So this is our whole thing so this is like an answer to your question, Clarissa. These people, this Abayudi team, oh my God, I love these guys. They have the best, like this, the future will be green or not at all. What did they have on theirs today? Another great, money will be useless on a dead planet. But you know, if we say that in our font, that's one thing, but they've got a video that we can then just post on our story. So we don't, this, you know, I one thing that makes me crazy is a lot of programs that say we're at capacity, we can't take any more. It's like, we're never at capacity, because all we need is people, and there's plenty of people, and ideas, and there's plenty of ideas. And so we have this 90-day plan that they can go through. And then we do for our top team. So last year we had 29 of our top teams that came in here, and for each of them, we created a profile. This year, instead of doing interviews, we're just going to ask them to do their own videos. We have a filmmaking 101 workshop coming up with Nick Zakar. He's a filmmaker that was with National Geographic that's going to teach our teams. And certainly people on here could be like incredible resources, but he's got a formula to teach teams how to tell their story using their phone. But you know, that was one of the areas we felt like, oh, that's kind of a log jam for us. So it's like, we just see those and we remove them. I love this team right here. This is called Juan for Nature. So in the Philippines, Juan, it's like how we would say maybe everyday Joe. So Juan means every man, every person. And it also sounds like one for nature. Their initial goal was, we want to train people on solid waste. So they started having those conversations, and people said, but like, we're not idiots. We don't want to pollute, but we don't have anywhere to put our these materials, these hard to recycle materials. We don't have anywhere to recycle this stuff. So this team, during their 90-day challenge, they built this, and they said, hey, we built a materials recovery facility. They built it out of bamboo lumber and coconut lumber that they rescued. You know, they worked with neighbors, and then they put a roof on it from a local junk shop. It was during this, all this stuff happened during the pandemic and is continuing to. So another way that they got people out there was they did Zumba classes, because, you know, it's a pandemic. What else? How can you get together? It has to be outside. So just the numbers of what happened during that time was, let's see if I can go back to that page, is our top 29 teams planted 43,000 trees. They held 59 community events. They started 55 gardens and 2 urban farms. They did 83,000 voter outreach contacts and a bunch of other stuff. They responded to typhoons and food drives and delivered 3,000 eco-friendly COVID kits to people who were unhoused. So what we found is that when you make it fun, like, that's my thing, like, if people aren't excited, you would think, well, people would be excited to have fresh air, like air, water, and land, because if we don't have it, we die. But the fact is, they're not excited. They're like busy. So if it's not exciting, then it's our fault because we didn't make it exciting. So what we found with this is freaking exciting. People come in, they have no idea what they're doing. Like Vicky said, we're like gonna try and see if we can gather this many pounds of trash. And then it's like, whoa, we just blew through our goal. Now they don't know if they can do 2 tons, but they might fail. You know, one of our teams, they said, well, we're gonna plant 10,000 trees in Zambia. It was this one guy. Well, he didn't do that. They only planted 2,000 trees. They only started 15 community gardens on the border of Zambia and Democratic Republic of Congo. So that was 15 communities that then had a source of income during the pandemic when people were starving. So it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. It's like a sports game. You don't know what is the thing. And that's the exciting thing that happens during the challenge. So if anybody's interested, it's climateactionchallenge.net. We have our summit comes up in December 14th to 16th. We have sponsorships available, but it'll be super fun to see what our teams have done during that 90 days.
Incredible. Thank you, Joan, for sharing those tangible action steps. Does anyone, and thank you for the panel for setting up such a beautiful platform and providing us with tangible frameworks and being here and allowing your knowledge, to sharing your knowledge and allowing us to have access to it. it's been absolutely incredible listening to all of the cool stuff that's going on. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? I just threw a whole bunch of information at you. No, pretty good. Okay.
I just put my email in the chat there if anybody needs to reach out, do something.
Nice. So from our group, Mimi, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to ask if any of you has connections to educators or to curriculum initiatives that can be taken into especially elementary and middle schools, or how those can be accessed by educators.
Yes, I do. I'm not sure what your specific area is, but I've got several connections around that. And are you looking for, what are you looking for in particular?
It's just that the concept of sustainability seems like could be an entry point into various project-based curricula. And the earlier we get students aware of the issues and interested in projects, especially if they're community service projects, that we can start encouraging young people to get involved and to make an impact.
Yeah, and my thing is environmental education nowadays is, it'd be one thing if what we were teaching is biology and like the cycles of life, but what we're teaching now is, yeah, these animals are going extinct, the ocean is acidifying, like that's a lot to be teaching. So I think having projects and this 90-day challenge idea, we've got a professor that's teaching it as their senior level class, but I mean, it's a great way to give people something actually to do. I'd love to touch base with you, Mimi. we have a few contacts for people who have project-based curriculum, including Ocean Guardian with NOAA, which is a pretty cool thing that we work with.
That's very cool. Winna, does your office have that?
Yeah, so we actually used to work for Denver Public Schools. So if you're local and need some connections, I'm happy to help. I will share that we are working with their Office of Sustainability more at an operational level. And so how do we have composting, right, in all of our schools, so that students learn what's compostable, what's recyclable, why does this matter? And so we're not as into the details of the curriculum and instruction side, but bringing more sustainable practices into the school environment. So it's just part of what they see and what they learn in school and as they're growing up. So I think it's really important that we speak to the generation that we're going to be passing this torch off to. But I will also say that our young audiences are, they're really engaged, they're very vocal, they're very outspoken. And so that's another audience to tap into. If you're seeing some groups that are doing for their schools, some sustainability organizations or clubs, they would be fantastic messengers to tap into.
When I was going to add to that, when I worked at Hill Middle School, I worked in the cafeteria one year, and they didn't have recycling in the cafeteria. This was in 2016, which is crazy. But when we tried to get recycling going, they said, we'll talk to a teacher. And the teacher said, well, we don't have time. And the principal said, well, if it was student led, then we could do it. And so, understanding that dynamic, and the students are ready, and they may just need an adult to help, be there for their club. But it is, and there's a group of students that are trying to get a sustainability or climate action resolution passed. So being an adult that can respond to those kids could be a really powerful thing to do.
Dan, Dannielle, you do a lot of work in the community. Do you have resources for reaching children?
So someone kind of had made this point earlier. I always look first to a youth-directed nonprofit, and they're, in the state of Colorado, there's something on the order of more than 22,000 nonprofits, registered 501c3s. There is likely someone already doing or engaging with the person you want to talk to. And sometimes it's as simple as, I am a fan of stalking people online. I will find their program director, make sure they're still there, and say, I have this idea. And so it's kind of radical collaboration, but just look to the people who are already in front of those folks, because what will happen inevitably is that you have this great idea A, to communicate to the audience. And then you sit down 5 minutes with the kid. This is sort of that getting to know your audience. And they'll go, well, we don't use that thing, so no one will hear your message. So I think really just tapping into people who are already in front of your target audience. And that's what I would do.
Allegra, any thoughts?
I think a lot of it was covered. I don't have anything to add.
Right on. Cool. All right. We are getting closer to time. So I would like to take this moment. I want to respect the panel's time and just thank you so much for being here and sharing your information. And again, it was just incredible. The recording will be up later, and I will absolutely send that over. And then please feel free to use the information as you see fit for your marketing purposes. Okay, so really quickly, here is we're going to go through a whole list of how to engage with us. Vicky Carey Davis, I feel like I've been talking a lot. Do you mind talking about how to engage with us?
Yes. So how to connect with us. So we try to be everywhere and all knowing. We are omnipotent like that. So here is our website for your viewing pleasure. If you're not really connected to us and want to learn a little bit more about what Twiggs & Co. does. All of our recordings for our Next Steps to Sustainability is on our YouTube channels. We record it. Hopefully we can gain some knowledge and share it with your community. Just throwing a bunch of links in here. We are fun and delightful on Instagram. Throwing that link in there. And then you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Love chatting on LinkedIn. So here are our links. Please like us, stalk us. Dannielle, I know you like to stalk people. Like us, stalk us, follow us, love us, adore us. Be radically collaborative with us.
Nice. Thank you very much, Vicky Davis. The Master Chief Relationship Architect. Okay, so there's a story that we tell quite often, and it's this story of a choir. One of the reasons why a choir can hold inhumanely long notes is because when one member is tired, they get to drop out, catch their breath, and come back when they're ready. So in the spirit of radical collaboration, which is showing up in its essence, is showing up as a whole human in our professional and business relationships, and then also in honor of a lot of the amazing work, and then allowing ourselves the space to rest. This is actually we're putting Next Steps to Sustainability on a brief pause, a hiatus. We have some really great resources that are available now. Honestly, thanks to COVID, because of a lot of stuff moving online, that increases accessibility to an incredible extent. And so there is no lack of really great information and ways to engage in the world of sustainability. So the first, I just put them in the chat. The first group is Women in Sustainability. This is a Denver-based Facebook group that has just grown very quickly, fairly exponentially, which is delightful. They do a lot of events, lunch and learns. Also, it's an incredible group of people just to hang out with. The Alliance Center is a very cool place to also be. Some powerhouses in the sustainability world hang out there. They have the Regenerative Recovery Coalition, which is open if you want to start helping shape how Colorado is going to handle all of these millions of dollars of COVID money that are coming through. This is the place to do it. So the Alliance Center has the Regenerative Recovery Coalition. They also host coffee chats, and then they're always looking to engage organizations who are driven to make the world a better place. Thank you, Allegra. Have a wonderful weekend. And then, of course, mentioned earlier, Good Business Colorado, another place to annoy your legislators. Please, by all means, bother the drunk dial them for all I care. The other place is a group called Consultants for Good. That has also turned into a large group of incredible people who are looking to not only provide resources, but also lift each other up with information and tangible things and just teamwork. Like if you want to have a group that has your back, I highly recommend, honestly, any of these groups. And then we are not disappearing. So Twiggs & Co, we do a lot in the community. We're always trying to be out volunteering. That's not going away. We are going to be looking for other platforms to speak on. So if you know anyone who's looking to talk about sustainability and be nerdy about it, let us know. In the language, of course, that is appropriate as discussed this evening. And then we're going to stick with the 17th, and we're going to host open office hours. Time to be determined. If you have any interest in coming through, hanging out with us, having a supportive space to be able to figure out a workshop, brainstorm, whatever you need, on our website and beyond, we're just going to be available to the public on the 17th of every month. So please put your email in the chat or contact us, and we'll add you to a recurring calendar invite. And I'm just going to go ahead and make the assumptive thank you for your grace in allowing us to take lessons from a choir. And if you ever have any questions or need anything, we are absolutely still here.